In a preceding chapter of this volume, attention has been drawn to the importance of the Turkish Sultan being at once the spiritual and the temporal chief of his Mohammedan subjects, of his being both Pope and Emperor. It will readily be imagined how much the Sultan's authority must have been augmented by his acquiring his current position of Caliph, Vicar of the Prophet of God, Commander of the Faithful, and Supreme Imam of Islam. It gives the Turkish Sultan dignity and authority, and may possibly give him practical influence not only over his own Mohammedan subjects, but over all who profess the creed of Islam, whatever be their race and whatever be their country, except the Persians and the few others who hold the Shiite tenets. Sir George Champel, page 14, speaks contemptuously of the idea of the Turkish Sultan having any influence beyond the Turkish dominions over Sunnite Mohammedans because he is Caliph. I do not presume to compare my opportunities for observing Mohammedan populations with those long possessed by Sir George Champel, nor do I cavil at his ability in using such opportunities, but I have had practical occasion to learn much of the habits and feelings of the Moormen of Ceylon, a country never under Turkish rule, and I have conversed much with those who have long been familiar with Mohammedans in other parts of the Far East. I know, as a fact, that on one occasion of deep interest to the Mohammedan population of Ceylon, when their principal mosque at Barbarian had been polluted by some Sinhalese who laid a dead pig in it on the desk of the reader of the Koran, and when there was great difficulty felt among the Mormon as to the lawfulness of their religious rites and liturgy being resumed there, a deputation was sent to Mecca to seek the advice of the chief doctors of the law in the holy city, and that such advice was obtained and followed. I believe that the teachers of the law at Mecca are generally consulted on questions of religious duty by Sunnite Mohammedans, and certainly the authority of the Sultan, the Caliph, is fully recognized at Mecca. I may add that there is full proof in Eastern newspapers at present that very deep interest in the fate of Turkey is felt and expressed by Mohammedans far beyond the limits of Turkish temporal power. In September 1517, Sultan Selim led back his victorious army from Egypt to Syria. 1,000 camels laden with gold and silver carried part of the rich spoils of the war, and a more valuable portion had been sent by Selim on board the Ottoman fleet to Constantinople. This consisted of the most skillful artisans of Cairo, whom Selim selected as he had done at Tabriz, and removed it to the capital city of his empire. Selim halted his army for some months, first at Damascus and afterwards at Aleppo. During this time he received the submission of several Arabian tribes and arranged the division of Syria into governments, and the financial and judicial administration of that province. He returned to Constantinople in August 1518. He had been absent but little more than 2 years, and in that time had conquered three nations: the Syrian, Egyptian, and the Arabian. Selim's attention was only earnestly directed to the development of the maritime resources of his empire. In 1519 he built 115 new ships of various dimensions, some of 700 tons. At the same time 100 new galleys that lay ready for launching were ordered to be rigged and fully equipped for sea. A powerful army of 16,000 men, with a large train of artillery, was collected and kept on foot in Asia Minor, ready to enter on a campaign at the first word of command. It was supposed by some that Selim designed a great attack upon Persia, but it was generally believed that the Turkish preparation would make the Rhodes, but Selim was resolved not to strike until the blow was sure to effective, and the armaments in the Turkish seaports and the building of fresh dockyards and arsenals were continued with unremitting industry in the succeeding year. From the immense naval force which was thus created, it could no longer be doubted that Rhodes was the object of attack. Selim had not forgotten the humiliating repulse from that stronghold of the Christians, which his grandfather had sustained, and he would not open the campaign until everything that could be required during the expedition had been amply provided and arranged, even in the minutest details. His viziers were more eager to commence the enterprise and draw down on themselves the rebuke of their stern and doubtful master. One day, when the Sultan, in company with Hassan Jan, the father of the historian Sa'adeddin, was leaving the mosque of Ayub, he saw one of the new first-class galleys, which he had ordered to be fitted out and kept ready for launching sailing along the port of Constantinople. Transported with fury, he demanded by whose order the galley had left the stocks, and it was with great difficulty that the Grand Vizier Piri Pasha saved the admiral's head by representing to the Sultan that it had long been usual to launch vessels when they were completely ready. Selim called his viziers round him and said to them, "You try to hurry me to the conquest of Rhodos, but do you know what such an expedition requires? Can you tell me what quantity of gunpowder you have in store?" The viziers, taken by surprise, were unable to answer, but the next day they came to the Sultan and said that they had ammunition sufficient for a siege of 4 months. Selim answered angrily, "What it was what what is the use of ammunition for 4 months when double the amount would not be enough? Do you wish me to repeat the shame of Mohammed II? I will not begin the war, nor will I make the voyage to Rhodes with such scant preparations. Besides, I believe that the only voyage which I have to make is the voyage to the other world." These words were uttered with a true presentiment of approaching death. He left his capital with the intention of going to Adrianople, and though symptoms of acute disease had already appeared, he rode on horseback, notwithstanding the remonstrance and entreaties of his physicians, nor could they prevail on him to discontinue the use of opium. When he reached the little village on the road to Adrianople, where he had formerly given battle to his father, and where, according to the Venetian narrative of his death, he had received his father's curse, the agony of his disease became too violent that he was compelled to stop. On the seventh night after he had left Constantinople, Hassan Jan, who was his inseparable companion, was sitting by the dying monarch and reading to him from the Koran. The movement of Selim's lips seemed to show that he followed the words of the reader, but suddenly at the verse, "The word of the Almighty is salvation," Selim clenched his hand convulsively and ceased to life. 22nd September 1520. The prince died in the 54th year of his age, and the 9th of his reign. The maxim which in our great dramatist the evil spirit gives to the northern usurper, "Be bloody, bold, and resolute," might seem to have been the ruling principle of Sultan Selim's life, but no one can deny his high administrative and military abilities, and in religion taught a bigot of the darkest order, he was unquestionably sincere. His personal eminence in literature and his enlightened and liberal patronage of intellectual merit, and others are matters of just ugly with the oriental writers. One of the most remarkable legal characters of this reign is the Mufti Jamali. If he disgraced himself by the fatwa with which he sanctioned, on the most frivolous pretexts, the war with Egypt, the honesty and the courage with which he often opposed the cruelty of Selim, are highly honorable in his memory. Nor can we refuse our praise to the monarch, who repeatedly curbed his haughty will and abstained from the coveted bloodshedding at his subjects' rebuke. On one occasion Selim had for some slight cause of wrath ordered 115 of the persons employed in his treasury to be put to death. Jamali stood before the Sultan and said to him, "It is the duty of the Mufti to have a care for the weal of the Sultan of Islam in the life to come. Therefore, I therefore ask of the lives of the 150 men unrighteously sentenced by thee to death." Selim answered, "The ulema have nothing to do with affairs of state. Besides, the masses are only to be kept in order by severity." Jamali replied, "It is not a question of policy of this world, but of the next, where mercy meets with everlasting reward, but unjust severity with everlasting punishment." Selim gave way to the Mufti, and not only spared those whom he had sentenced, but restored them to their functions. At another period in Selim's reign he had issued an ordinance prohibiting the trade in silk with Persia, and he had seized the goods of the merchants engaged in the traffic, and ordered the merchants themselves, to the number of 400, to be put to death. Jamali interceded in their favor as he wrote, by the Sultan's side. The German of von Hammer gives the more prettily: "Man beherrscht die Menge nur mit Strenge." On the Adrianople road, Selim cried out in indignation, "Is it not lawful to slay 2/3 of the inhabitants of the earth for the good of the other third?" "Yes," answered the Mufti, "if those 2/3 threaten to bring great wickedness upon earth. And can there be greater wickedness," said Selim, "than disobedience to the sovereign's command? Every country that renounces obedience to its rulers goes headlong to destruction. Disobedience is not proved here," rejoined the interrupted Gemali. The trade in silk was not previously prohibited. Keep yourself from meddling with state affairs, exclaimed Selim in fury. And the Mufti, not seeking to conceal his indignation, left the Sultan without the customary reverence. Selim's surprise equaled his wrath. He checked his horse and sat for some time absorbed in reflection, but at last he gained the victory over himself, and on his return to Constantinople he set the condemned merchants at liberty and restored their merchandise. He then sent a letter to Gemali in which he announced his royal pleasure to confer on the united highest dignities of the law, those of judge of Romania and judge of Anatolia. Gemali declined the proffered rank, but continued to retain the Sultan's esteem and friendship. The most memorable exercise of the salutary influence was in preserving the whole Greek population of the Ottoman Empire from the destruction with which they were menaced by Selim's bigotry. After the massacre of the heretical Shiites, Selim formed the idea of extirpating unbelief and misbelief of every kind from his dominions, and he resolved to put all the Christians to death, and turn their churches into Mahometan mosques. Without affirming his precise purpose, he laid before the Mufti Gemali the general question, which is the most meritorious, to conquer the whole world or to convert the nations to Islam? The Mufti gave an answer to the conversion of the infidel was incontestably the more meritorious work and the one most pleasing to God. Having obtained this, fatwa, Selim orders his Grand Vizier forthwith to change all the churches into mosques to forbid the practice of the Christian religion, and to put to death all who refused to become Mohammedans. The Grand Vizier, alarmed at the sanguinary edict, consulted Gemali, who had unconsciously given the fatwa which the Sultan used to justify the massacre of these Christians. By Gemali's recommendation, the Greek Patriarch sought an audience of the Sultan, and also with much difficulty was heard before the Diwan at Adrianople. He appealed to the pledges given by Mohammed in favor of the Christians when Constantinople was conquered, and he eloquently invoked the passages of the Quran which forbid compulsory conversion, and enjoin the Muslims to practice religious toleration to all the people of the books who submit to pay tribute.